Freilich in Chanukah, this is Gemara in Zevachim. Daf Sadi Dalid, and we pick it up on the bottom of Sadi Gimel. Sadi Gimel of Beis. We're at the Mishnah towards the bottom, and says the Mishnah Nites al Ha'ar, as we continue discussing different cases of the dam of the carbon, of the blood of the carbon getting in different areas, a direct first cousin of the whole parak, which is the dam chatas, that when it gets in the begadim, whether it's taught in kibos or not, and all the learning should be an incredible schos. Refuah shalema for Gabriel Simcha ben Miriam Ahuva b'seich sharcheli Yisrael. Says the Mishnah, Nites al ha'ar ad sheloi hovshat. If it's splattered the dam on the hide, not that it's splattered like we've been talking about al begadim on the clothing, but rather it's splattered on the hide itself. Says the Gemara, on what hide? Not on the animal's hide, obviously, because the animal is dead. It's splattered on one who is wearing ar. Ad shat. If this ar was not yet stripped from the animal, meaning there's an animal nearby, and it's splattered onto that hide, einai to'un kibos, it's not considered a beggar right now, and therefore, as Rashi says, it's be roy lekabotoma b'lechsarin b'chlacha, meaning has to be a current beged. But if it's currently an animal, then einai to'un kibos, but mishav shat, then yes, to'un kibos divi Rav Yehuda. You don't have to wash the whole hide, rather only, af mishahov shad einai to'un kibos. Now it's different girsayis over here, whether it's einai to'un kibos ella or just ella makom adam. Says the Mishnah, einai to'un kibos. We'll go with that gear, so they add in those two words. Ella makom adam. Only the place where the dam touched the ar, the hide, not the entire garment. V'davar shurai lekabel tuma, stam on a beged, tuma, v'roi lekibos, saying that's able to be washed. Echra beged v'echra sak v'echra ar te'urin kibos. All these materials, once it's clothing, require kibos. So again, the first machlokes in the Mishnah was ar in the ar form, animal, etc. Now the Mishnah discusses whether a leather jacket requires kibos, and says the Mishnah of kibos is where b'makayim kadosh, in a holy place inside the Hazara, ushviras klichares b'makayim kadosh. Similarly, if a klichares breaks, and inside this klichares there's the bus of a carbon, has to as well be done b'makayim kadosh. Rashi over here spells out what's going on over here. Shikeretz b'shvil shebisha b'chatas b'makom kadosh makom yalaflo. We'll see what's going on in the Gemara. Meirika shtifa b'klina chayshes. The purging, the rinsing of a copper vessel has to as well be done b'makom kadosh. Zevachim b'chatas mikachay kacha, and this is the dam of the fact that the dam of the chatos, again, the entire parak requires kibos, is a chumrah of kachay kachim. So says the Gemara Minani immediately, where do we know all the dinim in the Mishnah? Most particularly, we're honing in on, we've been discussing the din of kibos by begadim. Where do we know the din of kibos by ar, sak, etc.? Tanarabanan beged in liela beged minayin, the rabbis are misha of shat tamalai marasha yazem. Says the Torah, allowed the kabeis, that which is sprinkled upon shall be laundered. Yachla with fake. Shani marbe'ar achelay hovsha, maybe any material, even before the avshat, before the skinning. Tamalay mar beged. Ma beged haray lekabotoma. Avkol haray lekabotoma. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer, I mar beged and liela beged. Manay and the rabbis, where we know to include even sak v'chomini begadim, says Rabbi Eliezer. Tamalay mar shalal techabeis. Yochel, I think Shanimar be'ar mishav shetam lemer beged ma beged davar makabel toma. Avkol davar Amakabel Thomas. We have two different shitas where we learn out the din of the Mishnah from. Says the Gemara in the classical Shaila, my Beinaya, what is the practical difference between these two different ways of learning out the din of the Mishnah? The din of kibos, of Adam Achatos, of Kachei Kachim, is even by Arasak, etc. Amar Abaye, 5 lines down, Tzadidal Amar Aleph, Matlas B'chusa Mishaloish, Ika Beinaya, a cloth that is less than 3 by 3, which is usually the shear of Kabbalah's Toma. Manda Maroi Anami Roi. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that what's the criteria for Tong Kibos? Has to be Roi Lekabel Toma. He says, well, Roi Lekabel Toma. Why? Dibai, because if he wants Chishav Aleh, he can think about it. He can decide that this is how it is. That this little 3 by 3 piece of cloth, it's a patch for a garment, or it is a beged unto itself, and therefore it will be Tong Kibos. Right now, that is the nafka mina. Rava Amar, says Rava, second explanation. Beged that one decided to embroider it, to make a tzura on it. That's the difference. Mandam, according to Rabbi Yehuda, says all din of roi or nami roi dibai mevada leile machshavtei, because he can decide right now, no, it's not. I'm not going to make a picture on it. I'm going to use it as is. So two different terutzim. Rav Amar, a third teretz, and the fact that there's Rav Amar and then Rav Amar Avada is weird. So some have a gears over here. Ike beinayu utzva dechashal lekitza ike beinayu. The third shot is it's a spread, a blanket, we'll call it. The one is trimming it. That's the difference. Mandam aroyo nami roya. Mandam kabul tama lav kabul tama ad mekatzalei, till you finish trimming it, till you finishing this piece of blanket. Vehatanya, as we learned in a brayso of Shimon Menashe Omer utzva shechish lekitza tahira ad sheyiksenu. It cannot be makabul tama until you finish trimming it. So point A of today is the two different makayres. So the din of the Mishnah of that the din of kibos, of kachei kachim, of dam chatos, is not only by a beged, also by ar and sak, where we learn it out from, two different limudim, Rav Yehuda, and the nafkaminas, 3 different nafkaminas between them. Continues the Gemara, in kibos minani mili. Where do we know? The next din in the Mishnah, that the only place you have to do the kibos is where the makam adam, you don't have to launder the whole beged, you have to just wash that area. Says the Bryce, I would think not this way. I would think if it sprinkles a part of the beged, then the entire beged requires kibos. Continue the Mishnah. It's only that which requires kibos. Stomach of Yehuda. Ra'oi likibos mutikol kli devar geredahu. This goes back to the previous machlekes we just had, which comes to exclude Rav Elazar, which is what? A kli, which could be cleaned through scraping, not actual kibos. The Mishnah continue listing all the different types of materials. The Memra says the Gemara, the Arabar kibos. So you're going to tell me that Ari Kawash or Aminu, Haisa Allah the Shleshes. If it had a lashleshes on it, it had something disgusting, filthy on it. This is a din in Shabbos we had. Mikancha b'samaratot. Can wipe it with a towel. Haisa al shel arif was on high. Nice lemayim. Let put water in achetechla till it dissolves. So where do we see? We know on Shabbos schitasai, that by soaking something it's called schita, it's called malabin, it's called cleaning it. So frak the Gemara of ar is bar kibos. If you could wash ar, how you let it put ar on it on Shabbos? Amar Abaye like kasha harabanan harachirim. The Mishnah is the Rabbanan. We're dealing with shitas achirim. The Tanya begin vasayim mechabsay akli ve'ar megaroi. The Tanya held, and that is our shita. That are you cannot put water on. You can only megaroi. You can only scrape it. So says the Gemara. So we're going shitas achirim, not the Rabbanon. Come on, Ozla Had Amar Rav Chiva. Rashi asked the Gemara. Zin Sagin Av Kamini Kamei Rav. I was in front of Rav. Shichei Le Misane. And what did Rabbi Maya? And I would rinse his shoes with water, his leather shoes. Come on, Kirabana. That they hold rinsing with water is not a problem. That the only thing that you cannot do with leather is girer, but they hold that leather is allowed to be rinsed. Amar Rava frakti Rava Mikalamanda Amar Arla Kibasu. Really? Is there anyone that holds it's lavar kibos? Vaksiva begadash rev. Oy kol klihor asher techabeis. It's enough pasik. We have a straight up pasik that says that you're doing kibos on our Ela my Rava Kro Mas Nisan. Says Rava, I'll tell you the chilik. The chilik is not in shita. The chilik is in what type of ar it is. Says Rava, you know what the chilik is? That the Mishnah and the pasuk is berachin by soft leather. Kipligi bekashin. The machlekes is only by hard leather. Bekashin. His shoes were hard leather. Says Rava was chayzer, and says Rava, no. La vilsi da amri neka name olele krad chivsinim barakin. Stephen, are we going to say that the pasuk is only talking about barakin? It can't be, says Rava. Mila eskina bekliach saglia. We're not talking about the utensils made of hard leather that comes from overseas. So how can it be that we're saying that it's only with soft leather? Vikamar Rachmana Nibayi Kibos Elamar Rava. Rava says another pshat, 3 lines on the bottom. Saras Kivan. When it comes to saras, says Rava, Kivin the Miguva Kaparcha, since it gets from the leather itself, Mechalchala Lay. The tsaras, which is what the Torah is talking about, weakens the leather and makes it soft. And that's the reason why it's going to be softer of leather. And Rava, but says Rava, but even still this is shver. Why? Even based on the pshat I just said, I'll tell you what the kasha is. As we turn over to Sadi Dalet on base, articulates Rava, you know it's shver. Kare muksasa, pillows and blankets, they're acting, they're soft, and even though we see items, pillows and blankets, it's certainly not hard. And what do we see? We see that the Brisa teaches us that you're allowed to place water on them. Ela my Rava, so Rava says, okay, nubshat. 3 lines down, called kibos, let's lay kiskusi, lo yishmei kibos. Any kibos that does not involve scrubbing is not called kibos. And I scrubbed the shoes b'maya. And this was a sugya on Shabbos. Those who remember that there's different levels of cleaning on Shabbos. That with what did he do? He did shech shachen. Over here, that means he rinsed the shoes with water, but he did not scrub them. So ibirakim, if it was soft, kedivrakoli, but kashin is going to be keachirim. So iachi frakti gemara begenami. Why don't we say the same thing about a beged? Why does the Mishnah and Shabbos say it's aser? If we're saying that getting it wet without scrubbing it is allowed, so why don't we say that's the case by the kar muksasa, the pillows and the blankets? Beged, says the Gemara, I'll tell you the chilek. Shviyasa zeh kibusai. By a baguette, soket is the kibos. Rav Latameda Marava Zarak Sudul Amayim Chayiv. Tanisa Daraisa Zark Pishal Amayim. You're going to be chayiv. So by a pillow and a blanket, you can't even put water on it. So says the Gemara. Pishal Masudar, I understand of it kibos. Elazera Pishon. My taima. What is the reason they're putting the seeds into the water? V'chidim shem the mikadeach. You're going to tell me that I can sprout all types of seeds. Says Mar, you're right, but I'll tell you that when it comes to flax seeds, hanoch is luriri. They have a mucus which causes them to stick together, the zerapishin. So just to keep in track, the Gemara just made a quick left turn without even telling us. Rava answered, Zarik Sodalamaya is chayiv. So we're answering that if it's a beged, a pillow and a blanket, you can't put it into water. If it's a leather shoe, then there's going to be different levels. Are you talking about scrubbing it? It's going to be usr. Rinsing it with water is going to be mutter. But Rava continued, and Rava said that putting Zarapishtan into water is going to be chayiv. Frek to Gemara. I understand what you're telling me about the pillows and blankets, but the Zarapishtan, what's going on over here? Says the Gemara, it's going to sprout. If it's going to sprout, then why not wheat and barley as well? Answers the Gemara, no, I'll tell you why. Because the Zarapishtan have riri and mucus, and it causes it to stick together. Frek to Gemara, Yachish Lachem Nami, hide as well. Hasam Ka'avid Lisha. Says the Gemara, no, we're talking about Lisha. When it comes to Zarapishtan, and this is a difficult sugya, because maybe this is oatmeal, that just by placing water in it without any mixing, it clumps together. And therefore, that's what Rava says is an isser of lush. Lush means taking little items and put them together on Shabbos. Now, whether this applies to oatmeal or not is $1 million shayla. Large machleksim, but let's leave this for now. Darash Rava, Motel Chabis middle but Shabbos, you're allowed to launder a shoe on Shabbos. Popular Rava, Amar Achib Rashi, Zim Saginav Kamini Kamid Rav, Shachshich Le Misani B'Mayom. Says, well, you're right. Shachshachin Avil Kibos Loi. Hadar Uki Rava Amarei Alei V'Darash. Devarim Shamart Levechem Toy Sein B'Yodi Bram Kacha Omer Shachshach Mutter Kibos Aser, and that's the halacha that to rinse the leather shoe is going to be mutter, to scrub it is going to be a problem. We wrap up today's shir with the last two cases in the Mishnah. Hakibos b'makim kaddish, laundering of a beged that the chatas dam was on. You have to launder it even a makim kaddish. Similarly, if you have an earthenware vessel that requires to be broken because for whatever reason it became tameh or it became lacking kedusha, nicer v'chulu, or any other item that needs to be kasher, has to all be b'makim kaddish. Minani immediately says launder in a holy place. That's by the laundering. Shviras kli charas, if kli charas it needs to be broken. Kli charas shetavushal ba yishaver. Mariko shtifa, which are types of hagala b'kli nechoshes. That's your metal keli that got tamei or apostle and needs to be kasher. Minayin tamlamar b'kli nechoshes bushla. So the Torah puts them all together, and therefore we learn out has to be b'makim kadosh. Zevachim b'chatos, zevachim of the chatos, and other kachei kachim. Frakti mar v'su leka. It's only a chatos. V'oyikash shechlas tamel lefnei v'lefnim. There's also the chomer of the chatos. The dambri is brought lefnei v'lefnim or just lefnim, depending on which chatos. Says mar v'chatos chitzoina. She'im nechlas damel lefnei v'lefnim psula, and you can understand why there's different girsayis over here. So frakti gemar shechlas name psula. And says Gemara Kravi Kiva that Rekodam Shechlas Leicha Lechaper Psula Shkim Chaper Nal Chayve Krisus Bechatos. The Shemias, excuse me, the Ravi Kiva the Amar Kodam Shechlas Leicha Lechaper is Psula. Frakti Gemara wait Shkim Chaper Nal Chayve Krisus. But what about the Chatas Chitzaina? They give a kapara to those who are chayiv krisos. Isn't that a chumrah? Says Gemara Bechatos the Shemias Kol. Talking about the chatas of hearing the voice. Says the Gemara, but wait, what about the fact she can't tell in Arba Matanis? Kirby Shmal Damar Kol Dam Tunin Dal Matanis. Adal Kronos. Ultaimeh, Hayika Karen Midam, Hayika Atzva, Hayika Chuda, Elachan, Mitre, Talasa Chumri Nakin. You're right. There are other chumras. It goes in the corner, it goes in the two corners, it's put on the finger. There are other chumras of the Chatos, but we listed one of a bunch, and we'll pick it up from the Mishnah, B'siyata Dishmaya.